What on, brothers? What we have today is an unfortunate and fucked story about how a DM and the DM's party ruin a new time player interested to the hobby, just ruin their fucking experience, and it's honestly, ugh, it was kind of a hard read. But let's go ahead and hop right into this, and I'll give my opinion along the way because this is some pretty good shit, pretty good horror story. If I do say so myself. Let us begin. Hello, long time lurker, first time poster. I wanted to share something for a while now, and finally worked up the courage to post this. This takes place several years ago when I was starting to show interest in tabletop RPGs and wanted to try out D&D for the first time. One of my local game shops started hosting game nights, and I put down my name saying I was interested. I do have learning difficulties, and part of the reason I wanted to get into these games is I wanted to open myself up and get used to talking to strangers in role playing. Now, I do want to say, D&D is a fantastic way to do that. Role playing in general is a great way to get out of your shell. It really helped me, even though, even in my younger age, I tried to be more outgoing, but it really helped cement it throughout life. So he had the right idea. It wasn't long before I got a response from a DM that invited me to play in a Pathfinder game they were starting at the store, which, while not exactly the game I had hoped for, I was still excited to take part in it. Later in the week, I met the DM in the shop and the other players taking part. Besides the DM, the group included a vampire inquisitor who self-appointed himself leader of the group, a human fighter who fought with a bow, a dwarf fighter, a cleric played by the shop owner, and me, an elf sorcerer. It quickly became apparent that besides the shop owner, all the other players already knew each other, which wasn't something I was worried about at first, but I was often left out of conversations and confused by their out-of-context jokes and subjects. The first problem happened during character creation. I was entirely new to the game. I relied on the DM to help me figure out my character and fill out my sheet. For me, I originally wanted to play a barbarian, but for setting reasons the DM wouldn't allow that, so I went with sorcerer instead. I thought it would help to have a ranged unit on the party and made a backstory that fits with the DM's world. I wasn't familiar with how stats or abilities worked, but I thought I was making a good and balanced character, putting my highest stats in wisdom and intelligence as the DM told me to. It was only after the sheets were printed, the DM insisted on doing the sheets on his laptop and printing them out himself, that someone told me that sorcerers use their charisma for spellcasting, not wisdom or intelligence, and mine was low. Realizing the mistake, I asked the DM if I still had time to switch stats, but he just told me no bluntly and said he didn't want to reopen his laptop or waste paper, so I was stuck with the mistake. There's your number one fucking sign right there. DMs need to be open to making sure that players' sheets are done and done correctly. If they have questions or, bring up notable changes that need to be made. I mean, this is a new player we're talking about. I've been playing for years and I still make some fucking terrible sheets every now and then. Back to it. But the cleric told me there were multiple ways to improve my stats later on, so I was fine playing the slightly underpowered sorcerer for now. So before I continue, I want to share some details about the setting the DM created. There had been an outer plane invasion by some dark lord that created dungeons of varying sizes across the continent. Each dungeon had an item that tethered it to the mortal plane and needed to be found and removed. My sorcerer was an archaeologist and wanted to uncover any mysteries of the dungeons and had to become an adventurer to gain access to them. So the party was formed in a village to tackle some lower risk dungeons in the area before moving up to the bigger ones as we leveled up. After The first few sessions, where we'd usually complete a dungeon per session, I started noticing I was getting the short end of the stick on some things. The Inquisitor made most of the decisions, their friends usually backing them up in votes. The fighter didn't say much. Loot was given out in party formation order, with the person in front getting to loot first and going down the line. As a squishy spellcaster, I was at the back, so I only got scraps, like some coins or items nobody else wanted. And the dwarf seemed to hate my guts from the start. I'll be frank, I've never heard of giving loot out in formation order with the group I play with. If a large sum of loot is found, we all go out of character and talk about how we're going to divvy it up amongst us, amongst the actual players, and what would be best. Giving it out in formation order, I mean, that just seems like the greedy fucks are going to be able to be greedy fucks, and that's just it. But I digress. I'm a socially awkward person, and the dwarf made me very uncomfortable trying to talk to the group from the start. They decided their character was racist against elves, only me, and seemed to have it out for me. The only person I had any fun playing with was the cleric, who was very patient and will revive my character the multiple times I got knocked out, which happened often despite me staying in the back. I think he was the only reason I stuck with it for so long. We didn't have any minifigures or maps, with the DM keeping track of us in their head and narrating events at us. This made it difficult to keep track of where, how far enemies were in combat. Despite making my character's backstory fit the setting, I was pretty much denied doing anything related to my character's motivations. Any attempt to study or learn anything about the dungeons we were exploring had the DM telling me I see nothing but a blank wall. And when I would try to study the item anchor in the dungeon, the Inquisitor would run up and snatch it before I could, then gloating about it. And when I was lucky enough to get close to the item, I was told it gave off necrotic energy and I had to keep rolling constitution checks to not get sick, despite nobody else being affected like this. The Inquisitor even once held one of the items to my character's face, forcing me to make multiple con checks without them having to do the same. A few events I remember. We were exploring a dungeon filled with shadows that drained your con on touch, which is already bad for me as a squishy spellcaster. I was knocked down to 3 con in the first hit and forced to run away, with half the shadows following me and the rest surrounding the party. We eventually defeated them, but out of character, the DM and their friends talked shit about me and how useless I was. Later during downtime, I asked a barkeep about the local enemies and told them about the shadows. They just said they were common and ignored any further questions from me, the DM moving on to other characters. One time, I tried to ask a monster NPC in one of the dungeons about the dimension they were from, and the DM just looked at me and said the NPC was greatly offended and refused to talk to me. Alright, I think a child's being murdered outside my apartment. I apologize if you hear any murdered kids in the audio. Yes, well, after I said that, the constant mocking and my social awkwardness started to eat away at me, but I continued to play as I was desperate to play for a while longer. Which leads me to the last session I played. We were heading towards another dungeon that had reports of being infested by undead. We made short work of the skeletal guards and went inside to find a huge underground chamber full of those same shadow creatures. They stood shoulder to shoulder, creating a wall in the room. We tried thinking up ways to get around them, with the DM denying us from using any rolls to help and just saying we had to figure it out ourselves. I tried looking around for anything in the room that could help. I asked if there was a way to climb up the walls, if we could swing over them, or if we could build a makeshift ramp or bridge over them. The DM just said it was a large, empty chamber with smooth walls and floors. The DM laughed at our attempts, teasing us it was so easy. This just added to the growing frustration with everyone, with the rest of the party eventually taking their anger out on me. Oh, we sure could use a dimension door right now. Yeah, a wizard would be so much better than our useless sorcerer. Yeah, other player, why couldn't you have been a wizard? This went on for a while as I kept my head down checking any of my spells to see if I had anything to help. Eventually, we just gave up getting around the wall of shadows and decided to clear a pathway. Well, the cleric and I cleared a pathway, as we had spells best suited for combating undead. As we attacked one shadow at a time, waking them up and clearing a path, the Inquisitor went on ahead, as being a vampire made him immune to the shadow's touch. So they just went through them and waited at the doorway on the other end of the chamber for the rest of us. Once we had all made it across, we investigated the rest of the rooms on our way to the end of the corridor, with nothing of note happening. We approached the last door, knowing it had to be where the dungeon's item had to be. But because the DM kept track of the party's formation in their head, they decided we were all right up close to each other, and when we opened the door, we were hit by a surprise fireball, with me going down immediately. Everyone ignored my unconscious character even after the spellcaster in the room had been defeated. They decided it was more important to loot the place than help me, finding gold chests and magic robes. The cleric finally revived me while they were looking for the bound item. So, since they had all finished looting, I could only check the area close to the entrance. At this point, the rest of the party had been buying better gear and items, while I was barely managing to pay to stay at the tavern. The only items I had gotten was a crossbow I bought and some magic gauntlets that could change my outfit that never became relevant. So, with them talking out of character about how they were going to sell the robes they just got that boosted the AC for spellcasters and not allowing my character to make an insight check about it, I got a bit mad and cast Detect Magic. This was a bit metagamey, but they had lied to my character multiple times and denied them loot at this point, so I felt justified. But in the end, it wasn't worth arguing about, and only got an onyx crystal. I had no idea what it was worth, so I went over to the dwarf and asked them if they had any idea. Without making any rolls or giving me a chance to respond, the dwarf declared that they snatched the crystal from my hand, the dwarf saying it was theirs now. I tried to argue, but they simply said I shouldn't have trusted a dwarf. This went on for a while until the DM stepped in wanting to wrap the session up without saying who the crystal belongs to. By this point, I was feeling depressed, and my social awkwardness was in full force as I stewed over the week about it, even if I wanted to continue playing or not. Then, just a few hours before the next game was about to start and I was getting ready to head out, I received a message from the DM saying I was kicked from the game. The party had voted me out due to me being creepy and weird. I should have felt angry or upset, typing back my feelings on how things have been since playing with them, but I just calmly typed back that I understood and left the group, deciding to find my now free time doing something more fun. I did ask the store owner about his opinion on events, but he said it was not his place to vote and give his opinion towards another person's game, so he was at least alright taking a neutral route. In the end, I imagine the group of 4 friends just wanted to play between themselves. It took me a few years to find a new play group, but they're much better, and I'm much happier now. I've managed to come out of my shell more and roleplay with more confidence. Good for fucking him, man. I cannot even imagine how pissed off I would be in his situation. Again, this goes back to how me and my party play, me and my group. When we find a fucking huge loot haul, we talk out of character about what items would be best for who, and then if somebody wants a specific enchanted item or, particular piece of cool loot, and 2 people or 3 people or the whole party want it, then we decide it in character. Then we see how it's going to go down. Um, I'll just say this right fucking now. If I was playing a fucking sorcerer and there was robes and the whole party was fighters and they were magic and the whole party decided to not give the set of fucking robes to the sorcerer, I'd be pissed off at the whole group because, I mean, to be frank, I'd figured the dungeon master put that loot in purposely to buff me, or if not, that it was a lucky haul. You know, random loot generators are a thing, but there's no reason to ever want to lower the strength of one party member. That lowers the strength of the entire party for future encounters. That's just how it fucking is, man. But I hope y'all enjoyed. I mean, well, let's all just enjoy the fact the man found, man or woman, whatever. Let's just hope the person found a good group and sticks with them, right? He already has a good group now. Let's hope it stays that way. And let's hope all these other fucks get corona. Alright. I hope y'all enjoyed the footage I put up. I'm going to start doing that so you have something to look at. And everyone have a fucking good one, man. Peace.